in her kitchen and a propane tank exploded. Axed them all. My brain wanted to explode when I was reading this. I do have a little concern that this is going to incite alarm. I cannot reason to how this happens. Hey y'all, welcome back to another reproductive roundup segment. There are obviously about 10,000 different topics we could go over today, but we're gonna stick to some of the more interesting ones, in my opinion. Stick around till the end for one of the wildest things that I have ever seen regarding things people do with placentas. And then there's some information on abortion access and various topics related to reproductive health news that we will also be going over. California has banned forever chemicals in tampons, and that basically means that Gavin Newsom signed a bill that said by 2025 in California, there will be no more sales of tampons or menstrual products in general that contain intentionally added PFAS. PFAS is how it's abbreviated and how you'll usually see it in news articles. That stands for perfluoroalkyl and perfluoroalkyl substances, which are forever chemicals that can be found in tampons. Now, importantly, there's never been any validated data that says these definitely cause serious harm. So I don't want this article to make people go, oh my gosh, we are using tampons that are going to kill us. However, they do stick around, and the data that we have on PFAS at this point does link them to health problems. But again, there's never been a direct link to tampons and those health problems, if that makes sense. That being said, I think that if we can safely make them without those chemicals, then we should be doing that, because there's enough data on that chemical to know that it is possibly linked enough that if we can make them without it, that would be ideal. Personally, I'm a big fan of menstrual cups, and they wouldn't have those in it, to my knowledge. I haven't seen any publications that said that they do, so might be a good reason to use menstrual cups if you don't already, but there is a bit of a learning curve. I do have a little concern that this is going to incite alarm, because it can sound quite alarming, I would imagine. But again, I want to reiterate, we don't have any specific direct links to this is definitely harmful and like when they are in tampons. We just have emerging research that says they stay around forever, they're potentially linked to health complications, and they're in tampons. What degree those end up into the body from a tampon is yet to be determined. California is just taking initial steps to decrease their use. This is a great point from the Twitch chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, CatCat7 says, I also think about forever chemicals in the environment after tampons are thrown away, which is a great point, because most tampons are not biodegradable, and those chemicals, when accumulated in tampons that never go away, also just add to the environment in that way. So that's an excellent point that I didn't even think about when I was reading this, because I was coming at it more from a individual and patient health standpoint, but that's a great point as well. So abortion was on the ballot for this year's election in 10 states, and 7 of those states voted to increase access. New York Times broke it down in an article that I don't have access to because I don't have the New York Times subscription, but basically showed that Arizona, Missouri, and Montana reinstated what was essentially their pre-Roe standard of fetal viability. So access up until 24, 23, 22 weeks, depending on the state. Prior to that, Arizona had a 15-week ban and Missouri had a total ban. So this is great news, better access, and basically a revision of access to Roe v. Wade times for Arizona, Missouri, and Montana. Colorado, Maryland, and New York added some protections. Basically, those are states where abortion is already legally accessible by their state laws, but they went and voted to put it into their state constitution, basically to protect against the potential of a future ban, if that makes sense, like a future federal ban. Florida's amendment to restore their pre-Roe v. Wade standard failed, and this was really disappointing because this is one of the first states that had a major ballot measure to reinstate pre-Roe v. Wade access that didn't actually pass. But the reason it didn't pass is because it is in Florida required to have 60% of the population vote in order to pass those kind of amendments, and they had 57%. So not only was this by the majority of people in the state who voted what they wanted, it was quite close to the 60% 60% that the state requires, but it just didn't get there, which is interesting because there was never 60% of the US that wanted to overturn Roe v. Wade. So I would venture to say that despite what people have pretended is true, this is not actually what the people of Florida want by any measure that we could look at. South Dakota's right to abortion in the first trimester bill failed and only had 41% of the vote, which was surprising to me that there was 60% in Florida and 41% in South Dakota. But the population in places that tend to vote for more progressive measures is usually going to be kind of in a area that's more urbanized, more populous, big cities basically. And Florida does have more big cities. So that may be where the breakdown there came from. It could also be the wording of the bill, other things the bill is attached to. Who knows? 41% there. Nevada's fetal viability measure passed with 63% of the vote, but it's got to pass in the next general election again in order to actually be added to the state constitution. Nebraska had kind of dueling amendments and really confusing advertising for the measures that they had on their ballots. So initiative to ban abortion after the first trimester, which kind of enshrined their existing law into the Constitution, passed with 55% of the vote. This is really worrying because that means even with federal protections, there would be pushback that could be escalated once again to the Supreme Court. But I mean, let's be honest, we're not getting federal protection back anytime soon. So that doesn't matter at the moment. They also had an initiative to protect abortion access up until fetal viability, which just barely failed at 49% of the vote. So in my brain, I cannot reason to how this happens, how you get 55% who want to ban abortion after the first trimester, but 49% who want to protect it until fetal viability. That tells us that there was confusion amongst voters for what each of these bills actually was meant to do. So as a kind of spin-off of that discussion, in Georgia, public health officials dismissed all members of the Maternal Mortality Review Committee because they were unable to figure out who leaked the information to ProPublica. When I tell you my brain wanted to explode when I was reading this, I mean, in short, this is basically every state has a review committee that looks at all maternal deaths. This is not something new that we've created since the abortion laws were instated or since Roe was overturned. It is something that has been around and is an important thing we do in medicine when really bad things happen. In Georgia, 2 of those reports were leaked to ProPublica, who published them. Now, in one side of this, I can see why this would be a concerning thing that happens with regards to you're on a review committee that's looking at protected health information. And when those reports get leaked to the media, that is a concern for patient privacy. However, I can also look at this on the other side and say, how will we know if people are dying as it relates to abortion laws if we can't access this information? And the answer is we won't. So I think that these people should be protected as whistleblowers. And apparently so did the people on the review committee because they could not get them to out anyone. And because they couldn't get them to oust who was their person that leaked it to ProPublica, axed them all. The concerning part of that is that now someone's in charge of reappointing people onto this committee, whereas previously it was a nonpartisan committee that had been doing this as a matter of public health interest and something that they were passionate about as experts in their field. Now, the appointment process is much more likely to be fraught with partisanship, and I would like to see them rectify the situation by being very transparent with how they reappoint people, and by the people they ousted being very vocal about the importance of these reviews being able to be publicly accessible, because otherwise, how will we know and how will we let the public know that this needs to be changed? Because, hello, the laws are killing people, and that's the only way we know. This is a really, really cool story, but this is about using placentas to help heal burn victims. When I was a medical student, I was at a level 1 trauma center and we had a big burn unit there. And it was one of the most impactful rotations that I did because I cannot even explain to you what burn victims go through from a pain and debilitating recovery standpoint go through. It is awful, but also the skill required for surgeons and physicians who take care of burn patients. It is an incredibly high skill field. So what is cool about this article is that they are using placentas to help burn victims heal. So this person here is Marcella Townsend, and she had a very severe facial injury that completely disfigured her after she was injured in 2021 in a propane explosion. And she goes in this article, you can see, I mean, her face looks great. And some of the pictures in this article are quite graphic. So if you're worried about graphic photos, you might want to click off now. But she was basically in her kitchen and a propane tank exploded. And she accounts this story, says basically like, I was just absolutely looking around before I started feeling pain, in awe of the level of damage that had happened when all of this occurred. That her quote was, "It was like Bigfoot had walked across the counters," which you can imagine the amount of damage done to her if it looked like her home had been trampled by Bigfoot. So that happened in Georgia in 2021, and she was for 6 weeks in an induced coma in the burn trauma unit, which is not uncommon for people who have very serious burn injuries. She had second and third degree burns over most of her body, and her face was reportedly unrecognizable. She really was in a place where the surgeons weren't sure that they knew how to help her or how to improve her situation. And she said that they had taken a human placenta and they essentially used the stem cells from a placenta to help with repairing the facial structure and cells. They go through how a placenta forms and what it does in this article, and says that it forms and that it provides a fetus with nutrients and antibodies. I would argue that more importantly, it also provides it with oxygen because it's underwater and can't breathe. Regardless, they go on to kind of describe that the placenta has lots of stem cells, which is true. It is one of the richest sources of stem cells other than embryonic stem cells, and also contains collagens and cytokines that doctors and researchers can use, which are quite unique, especially for being able to obtain them in high enough quantities to research, and then also if the research is emerging as being beneficial to be able to use in medicine. So the placenta is very unique in that regard. So they found that grafts, when they were derived from placentas, could help with reducing inflammation and pain, help healing burns, and probably the most important aspect of this, which is prevent formation of scar tissue and adhesions from surgical sites, and that would, I'm assuming, include burn sites, and sometimes even help restore vision. Not from burns. This is other things that we can use placentas for. This is all still fairly new emerging research, but it is very promising and very cool. They go on to talk about us needing to donate more placentas to research, which, fair enough, but if there was an easy way to do that, I'm sure we would do that instead of discarding them. So hey, researchers, maybe do marketing better if you want people to donate their placentas to medical research. I can't do that as a doctor. This is an annoying part of this article to me, that they say like, oh yeah, most of the time it just goes to an incinerator, and I'm constantly in these hospitals that don't donate or utilize the placental tissue, and I hear the obstetrician say, we don't need to send it to pathology, just trash it. Well, what the heck are we supposed to do? The patient has to decide if they're going to donate it to research. So you've got to reach out to the patients for this, not me, regardless. So here's some photos of Marcella's burns. So the propane explosion that happened in her mother's house had injured her with second and third degree burns over a majority of her body. So you can see these injuries on her back. Now, she's probably had grafts at this point in the photo on the left, and most of the time you would be doing skin grafts for these patients. So that becomes a really big problem when either they reject a skin graft that was made from not their own skin, or they have burns so bad that you can't just take a graft from somewhere else. So sometimes what will happen, like if someone has burns and it's just a certain part of their body, we can take a graft from another part of their body and basically put the skin there so that it'll grow. Because when you are burned severely, second and third degree, the skin doesn't just come back. back. It can't just come back. And so what you'll do is take healthy skin and take a graft of it, which is like remove it, but that skin will grow back because it has blood vessels still attached to it, unlike the skin that was injured so severely from a burn where you've lost that vascular supply. And you will graft it onto that burn. Sometimes it takes, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times, especially in places like the face, even with a graft, it can be very disfiguring. And then you can see her face here as well. I think that that is incredible to see that photo of her face and then her face here. This is truly remarkable. So because a placenta protects the fetus from maternal immune system, the tissue is considered immunologically privileged. What this means, they're basically describing here that when you talk about people rejecting grafts that don't belong to them, like if you had someone that donated an organ to you, you might reject that because your body recognizes it as a foreign body. This is less likely to happen with placentas because the very nature of placentas is that it is supposed to be recognizing that there are two different immune systems here, one on the side of the baby and one on the side of the mother or person who's pregnant, and kind of mitigating that. And so you become a immunologically privileged organ, essentially, that doesn't always cause rejection, even in situations where if you grafted, something else, some other kind of organ, you might see rejection. It says that placental grafts are basically not rejectable. I'm not sure if that's accurate. I would imagine that there can still be some rejection, but it is much lower for sure. And because of the nature of the stem cells that are in the placenta, it encourages rapid regrowth. And they're not stem cells that can become anything like you would see with embryonic stem cells, but they are stem cells that can become important parts and assist with cellular development in a way that encourages less formation of adhesions and scar tissue, which is an immunological process, and quicker healing. So this is absolutely fascinating. I asked on Instagram today, if you're not following me on Instagram, feel free to go follow me. But I had a Q&A box up, and one of the questions in it that I didn't actually get around to answering was, what do you think is the most exciting thing that will come out of medicine in the next 5 years? And for me personally, I think placenta research is one of the most exciting advancements that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. And I would like to see a more concerted effort for people who don't want to keep their placentas to have a streamlined and easy way to donate them to research or medical use when they want to, because I personally don't even know how you would do that if you wanted to. So I think that that's maybe a opportunity for these research teams and even the farm, because big pharma is going to have to be involved. I don't know if you guys knew this, but big pharma is not always bad. The capitalism associated with it certainly is, but pharma companies are going to have to be involved in the development and manufacturing of these medications or creams or grafts or whatever. And so I'd like to see that gap bridged where people can have an easier way to donate them if they might be useful in that avenue. The next one we're going to talk about is from my home state of Texas, and it was published in the Texas Tribune. So unsurprisingly, what this article says is that basically strict abortion laws are straining the OB-GYN workforce in the state. Now, notably, Texas already was quite strained for OB-GYN doctors, especially in rural communities. There are some counties in Texas, my home county in the Panhandle included, that have no OB-GYN doctors in the whole county. And people have to drive really far for obstetric care in some situations. Now what we're seeing is that since the overturn of Roe v. Wade, actually probably before that, since the heartbeat bill in 2021, I believe is when that was first done, and worsening after the Dobbs decision in 2022, we start seeing people in Texas not wanting to practice there because of either I'm morally opposed to what's happening, I don't think the government should be overreaching like this, I'm afraid for my job, I won't be able to adequately take care of my patients, I am worried about the fact that everybody else is leaving and now all of this is going to fall on me. Any myriad of reasons, but definitely a concern. And there's basically a survey that was done to kind of review why we're seeing this mass exodus of OB-GYNs leaving the workforce in Texas. So this is the survey that went out, and they're basically trying to look at the impact of these new laws on the workforce for OB-GYN doctors. So a quick summary of kind of what they found is they went through Texas-based ACOG members. So I actually received this survey. I didn't take it because I had already left the state before all of this and didn't feel like it was really appropriate for me to answer. But they received 447 responses from practicing doctors and 47 from Texas-based resident physicians, which are people who are still in training but are already doctors. And more than 70% felt that the near total bans were negatively impacting their ability to do their work or take care of their patients. It prevented them from providing high-level care and evidence-based care. 21% of all of those doctors said they had considered leaving Texas, and 14% said they already decided they want to, but it's not feasible. 13% planning to retire early as a result of restrictions. 29% don't really have a clear understanding of the laws as it relates to their practice. Hi, remember how I was saying that this is a thing in every video that we've ever made on this, and how every time we say it, people go, that's not a thing. Doctors don't feel that way, even though I'm a doctor telling them that they do feel that way. Okay, 30% don't have a clear understanding of how their practice could be impacted by these laws, meaning they're concerned with if they might get in trouble for taking care of their patients, reasonably so. And 60% fear repercussions that prevent them from practicing according to evidence-based medicine. This is a very important survey. It's not the best way to get information, but I think this is very valuable information. 60% of Texas-based physicians who answered this survey said that they fear repercussions to the point that it keeps them from being able to practice evidence-based care. If you are a person in Texas who needs obstetric or gynecologic care, that should terrify you. So some quotes from this survey. I am just waiting to be imprisoned for something that likely would be saving the life, uterus, or reproductive health of my patient. I could not help but cry in front of my patient when, for the first time, I had to say, I'm sorry I can't take care of you, and I cannot even tell you where to go to find someone who can. Another quote, it is demoralizing to work when proper care is either illegal or exists in a legal limbo or ambiguity in which no clear guidance or protections exist. From the OB-GYN residents who responded, 57% said that abortion laws would affect whether they planned to stay or leave in Texas when they finish their training. This is alarming because most people tend to practice fairly close to where they went to residency. And we need OB-GYNs in Texas. And now 60% are saying they would strongly consider leaving after training because they don't feel like the laws make it a reasonable place to practice. And 52% of those said that the laws were the contribution to them considering leaving. So half of trainees in Texas are concerned about staying because of this. There were some quotes that were included from the resident doctors as well. Patients in Texas still need and deserve care and people to advocate for them for the change needed to have a safer and more ethical future. 100% agree. And I also think that the government should be doing that, not making it worse. I want to be able to provide full scope abortion care to my patients. So ideally I will be leaving Texas after my training. However, my family ties will likely keep me in Texas for my career. And I get that. It is very hard to leave Texas. I didn't leave because of the abortion laws, but I have not gone back at this point in large part because of the current political state. It makes it hard. I am sad for my patients there and friends and family. It's scary. And I just, yeah. All right, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll hopefully see you for a stream next week. Love to have you if you want to subscribe or follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you next week for another stream.